Francis Deanna Willison with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and we're here with another look inside Bilbo's journey. It's just the first book we're looking at for our Lenten series, From Cozy to the Cross, a Lenten adventure. And we've already been through dragon sickness, and we're on to Bilbo the Peacemaker. Smaug has been destroyed, but things still aren't right, are they? We still need some time. It's a time when we all face that choice. There's a time of great upheaval. And we all respond differently, right? When there's a great stress, do you turn towards others? Do you reach out for help? Do you reach out to offer help? Do you allow that community to grow and build, and at the same time turning towards the light, which is Christ? And only in working together can we really grow and bloom. You know, this channel here on YouTube is called Our Blooming Catholic Life, and that's part of the imagery. We can turn to the light, but we have to be rooted in our faith, turning to God. But plants just don't flower on their own, right? There's so much needed for them to grow fruit. They need all kinds of nutrients. They need water. They need the sunlight. They need a proper environment, right? And in order for them to bear fruit, little bees, various kinds of insects, birds, animals have to go about and take that pollen around. It will bear fruit. And then again, that fruit has to somehow be transported somewhere in order to bear new life. Is it going to land on what kind of soil? Does it just drop and land on good soil? Is it soil that's been prepared, perhaps by the dropping of some leaves? Right? We're dying to ourselves a little and preparing a bed for new life. There's so many considerations here. I'm going to try this particular one. I don't think I'm going to bring in a lot of outside resources. I think there's so much richness here just to be able to discuss with you. So we're talking about, in this book, the destruction of the evil thing. In this case, it's the dragon. But destroying the evil thing doesn't necessarily destroy evil itself. And if you've been in a horrible situation of abuse or a traumatic death of a loved one, just the act of it doesn't put everything to rights, does it? The end of a war, is suddenly everything good? No. There's still evil out there. There's still something bad that happened. Not just the bad being, but the bad that happened during that time. And we may have a number of wounds. We may have inflicted a number of wounds. And we have to address that in order to move on. It tells here, the death of the dragon does not lead to the healing of dragon sickness. On the contrary, the dragon's removal seems to accentuate the evil effects of the sickness. In this book, it's on the dwarves and on Thorin in particular. What do we do in the aftermath? You have a chance to change, but you're reacting to a wound. Is it healing or is it festering? I guess that's really what we're asking here. On page 100, we have Roke the Raven. He delivers news of Smaug's death to Bilbo and the dwarves and reminds Thorin that his small company of 13 dwarves is a small remnant of the great folk of Durin who once lived under the mountain, and therefore be wise to share the gold with men and elves so that peace might prevail. So he's giving a little wisdom, a little bit of a path forward. Yes, you technically have a right to this, but is that the prudent thing to do? And on page 101, we're told the dwarves are increasingly afflicted by the dragon sickness and the madness it causes. Bilbo found himself isolated and alienous from his friends, and he became increasingly uneasy at the turn of events. Then we have Bard coming back. He technically slew the dragon on the advice of the little bird, and it involved some moonlight. Like, there was a lot of things involved, and it was Bilbo who found the secret. So who gets the reward for killing the dragon? Have they earned that? So much of the treasure in the hoard was stolen by Smaug from the men of Dale after the dragon had destroyed their city. Did those men have a right to it? Or because it was in that place where the kings had lived, the dwarven kings had lived, does it belong to the dwarves? And then Bard asks something beautiful on page 101. Bard asks whether Thorin has no thought for the sorrow and misery of the people of Lake Town who had aided the dwarves in their distress. So I guess three things there. The men of the Lake Town, one, the dragon had been stealing from them all along as well. And two, they did aid the dwarves on their journey. And three, they actually killed the dragon, but they're living in misery right now. The destruction, remember when he lost the riddle to Bilbo, the dragon went out in a rage and destroyed the town. What needs to be done now? What does justice look like? It says that we need wisdom and common sense. Yes, but here's the thing. You have to be well-formed in order to even hear or have those skills. Those wisdom and common sense don't come from a vacuum. You have to have led a certain kind of life. Common sense can be street smarts more than, and just survival mode better than a long-term mode. I think that's where I'm going there. We're looking at both short-term and long-term here. And it's so easy in those situations to just look at one or the other, but we really need to look at both. It warns us, or we will become like Thorin, who in his avarice and pride has become the very dragon that he sought to slay. And we all know some people that happens with. They fight in adversity, and they should have gotten out and gotten better, but they've become the thing they hated. And even if we don't fully become the thing we've hated, we can often take on certain traits of them. I love this line on page 103. It says, "How shall you be fed without the friendship of the goodwill of the lands about you?" Now this is talking about of other people, because the dwarves, I think at this time, they may be locked inside the mountain. I'm not sure. And they're like, well, you're locked in there. You're all to yourselves. Good luck with that. You've got the gold. The townspeople could just wait for the dwarves to die from lack of food and go in and retrieve the gold themselves once the dwarves have died. But they're not doing that. They're saying, no, we should do something. There should be something more fair for everyone, because it is fair that they go and help and feed and rescue the dwarves, again, as well as sharing in those spoils. But what does that look like? How do you broker that peace? And what does Bilbo do? He notes the greatest treasure, the brightest jewel of Smaug's that Smaug has stolen, and it's the thing that truly belongs to Thorin, and he values it above a river of gold. So what does Bilbo do? As payment, in justice for the deeds he has done, he steals it. And he takes it to the people, and he gives it to them and says, offer this back to Thorin, you can negotiate a deal with it. Whew. Risky. But then Bilbo refuses to offer to remain to stay in the safety of the camp. Instead, he goes back into the dwarves and takes his lumps. He takes accountability. Yeah, I really did that. I thought it was fair and just and right, and that's the thing I did. Gandalf, it tells us here in 104, when he found out about that, Gandalf says, "Well done, Mr. Baggins. There is always more about you than anyone expects." And just hearing those words and seeing Gandalf caused the hobbit's beleaguered heart to leap with delight. And we know, friends, when we've taken that leap of faith and we know we've done something that's right, but it's going to make some people angry, we should be able to turn our hearts to the Lord and know that He understands that. He has done the hard things as well, and was left by His friends for a time, wasn't He? Abandoned on His journey to the cross. And yet, there He is, cooking them fish on the shore, meeting them in a locked room, wherever they are. He's like, no, I'm here. I'm still here for you. I understand. I'm here. You're my friends. What a great love. And that is just such a model for all of us. And when we have our times of distress, do we have that faith to rest on, right? Our roots, our shoots, our flowers? Do we have all that? Do we have all that? It's all a system, and we all have to do our part. There's, of course, more here, talking about on page 107, in this embrace. It says, let's just start up at the beginning of that paragraph. Much of the Christian morality of The Hobbit is conveyed in this final conciliatory exchange between Bilbo Baggins of the Shire and Thorin Oakenshield, the king under the mountain. The adventure has been bitter insofar as it ends in death, and no amount of material wealth can compensate for the loss of life. And yet Bilbo would have rather have shared in the deadly perils of his friend, even in an adventure that ends so bitterly, than have stayed at home in the comfort of the Shire. In this embrace of suffering, even unto death, Bilbo is encapsulating the whole idea of life being a cross that we are called to carry willingly and indeed enthusiastically. Life is not about the pursuit of creature comforts and taking the path of least resistance. It is about love, which can be defined as willingly laying down our lives for others. It is the paradox at the heart of the Christian life. The one who embraces suffering, who dies to self in order to die for others, is actually happier than the one who shuns suffering and puts himself above others. And the most miserable people are those who are self-centered, whose friendships are phony, and who value material possessions over spiritual wealth. For in truth, the cross cannot be avoided. Everyone carries his cross, and the one who resents it is nailed more painfully to it than the one who embraces it out of an act of love. It tells us that Bilbo's actions were laudable and had faltered not because of any failure on Bilbo's part, but because of the hardness of Thorin's heart. And that is something that we have to remind ourselves sometimes. We work so hard for others, and we're dying to self, we're offering our life for them, and they could not care less. We have to remember that's nothing that is lacking on our part is the hardness of the other person's heart. If they would let grace in, it'd be lovely. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But God gives us free will and a choice. And in the end, we have to do what is ours to do and accept that we cannot force that on others to do what is theirs to do. We can only encourage them and pray for them. And I think that's where we'll end today. Pray, friends, that myself and yourselves, we may all be able to accept our crosses willingly, and that we're going to pray for those who do not willingly accept those beautiful graces, who can make the trials of this life more bearable and indeed joyful. Friends, I leave you today. May God bless you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.